Hi, I'm 36 years old and I live with my husband and two gorgeous boys. My eldest is 2 and my youngest is 6 months, and this is my story. I had a very difficult upbringing which has led to me having depression from a very early age. My mum has a severe mental health issue and it wasn't long before my parents separated. I lived with my mum, and when I was 5 my mum met my stepdad and my sister was born when I was 8 years old. I was constantly moving between my dad's grandparents and my auntie's home, and I found it hard to maintain any friendships. During my childhood I was abused. I felt like I had no one to turn to, but eventually I opened up and received great support from my teachers and my grandparents. I owe everything to them. I turned to the boyfriend I had at the time. He helped me to move out to a different area. We eventually broke up but remained friends, and through him I met my best friend. A short while later I met my husband and I moved in with him. The house needed a lot of work and still does, which doesn't help my mood, especially when well-meaning family members go on about it. My husband and I decided to try for a baby and I got pregnant quite quickly. I always wanted children, but the thought of being a mum also scared me. I became very ill and suffered with severe morning sickness which continued throughout despite being given medication. I was working as a bank nurse, but due to my illness I had to leave and received no financial support, which put us in a difficult position. My husband could see how unwell I became and managed to change his hours in work to ensure that he could spend some time with me at home. During my pregnancy I had a lot of pressure from family members who kept getting involved and interfering with some of my personal issues, which also took a toll on my health. The birth was very distressing. I underwent a few procedures to start my labour and didn't give birth until 11 days after my due date. I was taken into my local hospital and immediately felt as though no one was listening to me. I was passed from ward to ward and was told that I wouldn't be having my baby anytime soon. Later that morning I was given a midwife. By then I was ready to push. She was very unsupportive and made a number of negative and inappropriate comments towards me, which fueled my anxiety. My husband and sister were a fantastic support and I managed to give birth naturally to my son in the early hours. After giving birth I was looking forward to breastfeeding. It was something I was determined to do, but I really struggled to get my son to latch. I wanted someone to ask me if I needed help, as I was too scared to ask, but no one did, and due to my fatigue following the birth, I turned to the bottle and gave up. The terrible pregnancy, quick birth and lack of sleep on the ward just overwhelmed me. I was desperate to go home and to be in my own bed. The first 2 weeks were hectic, with visitors flying in and out. I decided to try breastfeeding again, as I read somewhere that it was possible to re-lactate. A friend of mine was a great support at the beginning, but it was a challenge to stay in regular contact. I tried and persevered for a long time, but nothing worked, which was really upsetting for me. I felt like a failure, and as though he didn't want me. Once the visitors stopped and my husband returned to work, is when I noticed my mood declining. I found myself lacking in motivation and would spend most days sleeping if I had the opportunity. Getting out of bed was a challenge on some occasions. I found it difficult to leave my house and was constantly fatigued. I confided in my health visitor, who was really supportive and invited me to a baby massage class, which I did for 6 months. I took myself to the doctor and asked to go back onto my medication to help me manage my mood. I began to recognise the triggers of my frustration and openly told my husband how I was feeling. He reassured me that he would be there for me no matter what. I participated in a locally run baby blues course, an incredible years, which gave me the skills to understand my son's development, and I also joined social media forums and online breastfeeding groups to seek support and exchange stories about what happened. When I found out I was expecting my second child, I came off my medication for the first trimester. My pregnancy was just as difficult, and I found myself ill again through the stress and pressure I was receiving from family members. I found myself struggling with the balance of being pregnant and trying to care for my young child. I took my frustration out on my son, which I knew he didn't deserve, and I felt guilty immediately afterwards. I tried confiding in my family about my actions, but instead of being supportive, I'd be constantly reminded, which added to my guilt. After experiencing a bad upbringing, this was something I desperately wanted to avoid with my children. I wanted to give them the opposite of what I had growing up, and I'm constantly worried I'll turn into that bad person. After the first trimester, I went on to a lower dose of medication. I felt like it helped me cope, and it stopped me from becoming the person I fear I may turn into. I gave birth naturally for the second time, and I was more confident and determined to breastfeed. My son took to it straight away, but after a while I noticed he started changing colour and began to shake. The The nurses took him away and told me that he wasn't feeding properly. He was taken to the special care unit and had to be tube fed. I immediately became nervous and worried. I was separated from every member of my family and felt completely out of control. Once he was stable, we were both allowed home. I continued to mix formula with its breast milk and eventually got my son to breastfeed completely, which made me really happy. It's all I ever wanted to do. I rejoined the baby massage group and am now doing the Incredible Years refresher course, which I'm still enjoying. I find that talking to others and getting myself out and about helps my mood. I'm still struggling with family issues, but I found a way of managing my frustration. Instead of screaming and shouting, I now have a game with my children, where we pretend to be lions and we roar as loud as we can. It isn't the best solution, but it lets me vent in a child-friendly way where my sons think I'm just playing and end up laughing, which immediately pulls me out of my low mood and makes me smile. All I want to do is to make them happy and see them smile. My children and my fantastic husband are my motivation to push through my low mood, and I'm slowly getting there one step at a time.